Is recruitment marketing stuck in a rut? Do employers need to diversify their strategies to keep up with candidate behaviour? And what role is AI playing in all of this? Keep listening to find out. Support for this podcast comes from Smart Recruiters. Are you looking to supercharge your hiring? Meet Winston, Smart Recruiters' AI-powered companion. I've had a demo of Winston. The capabilities are extremely powerful, and it's been crafted to elevate hiring to a whole new level. This AI sidekick goes beyond the usual assistant, handling all the time-consuming admin work so you can focus on connecting with top talent and making better hiring decisions. From screening candidates to scheduling interviews, Winston manages it all with AI precision, keeping the hiring process fast, smart, and effective. Head over to smartrecruiters.com and see how Winston can deliver superhuman results.
There's been more of scientific discovery, more of technical advancement and material progress in your lifetime and mine than in all the ages of history.
Hi there, welcome to episode 730 of Recruiting Future with me, Matt Alder. Recruiting Future helps talent acquisition teams drive measurable impact by developing their strategic capability in foresight, influence, talent, and technology. If you're interested in finding out how your TA function measures up in these 4 critical areas, I've created the free Fit for the Future assessment. It'll give you personalized insights to help you build strategic clarity and drive greater impact immediately. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast to complete the assessment. It only takes a few minutes. This episode is about talent, influence, and technology. Job seeker behavior is changing, with Gen AI and social media becoming even stronger forces of influence in career choices. However, a lot of recruitment marketing activity is failing to keep up, with employers stuck in a rut and not casting the net wide enough or in the right way. Shockingly, many TA teams still lack basic visibility into their recruitment marketing metrics and can't prove ROI to their stakeholders. While candidates are increasingly using ChatGPT for job searches, few employers have optimized their content for AI discovery, and many career sites still remain conversion killers. So, what should employers be doing, and how can they prepare for 2026? My guest this week is Neil Costa, founder and CEO of HireClicks. In our conversation, Neil reveals the stark reality of where many organizations actually are with their recruitment marketing efforts and offers valuable advice on how they should be moving forward. Hi, Neil, and welcome to the podcast.
How you doing, Matt? Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm doing pretty well, and it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Please, could you introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do?
Sure, absolutely. My name's Neil Costa, and I'm the founder and CEO of HireClicks. HireClicks is a recruitment advertising agency. I started about 15 years ago and been in the online space since the mid-90s and worked at Monster.com doing advertising for the Monster brand and for a bunch of years before that. So
fantastic. So, it's a pretty interesting time in recruitment marketing at the moment. What would you say the biggest challenges are at the moment?
Yeah, I think most TA leaders, even CHROs, have to be thinking about the best ways to do 2 or 3 things. Like number one is, how do they stand out amongst other employers? How do they tell their stories? How do they attract talent from several different generations right now and have it all work? I think that's the number one challenge that they have. I think second, I think that we're in a little bit of a rut when it comes to how they attract candidates. We've got a couple big players like Indeed and LinkedIn, and they've been wonderful sources, but I do think that they kind of dominate how companies find candidates. So I think there's a real need to think about diversification, how to keep operating on those sites and keep driving candidates. But, it's just like having a stock portfolio that might be overinvested in a couple big stocks. Like, how do I go out and find some other source or signs of life where I can get candidates. And then third is related to AI. What's going to happen on the AI front from the candidate side, from a operational side? How does it improve my operations? Where can I save? Where can I better match with candidates? So I think those are the three things that everybody should be worrying about a little bit.
So I want to dive into the AI stuff in a second. But before we do, just because it's kind of a constant discussion that I see people talking about Indeed and LinkedIn, and this is changing, that is changing, whatever it might be. And you're absolutely right. They are the kind of the sort of the main sources for many employers. How can people diversify? What do people need to think about? What works? What approach do you sort of take with your clients?
Yeah, usually when we're looking at that, you've got to break it down into several segments. When you think about what else can I do in the job board space? That's how I think of it. The first bucket is like, what else can we do in the job board space? In the US, we've got ZipRecruiter, that's a big presence, and other markets. If I go down to, number 3, 4, 5, can I get enough volume? Can I get enough quality? So that's kind of the first chunk or the way that we would look at it. The second is, I start looking at search. How do we go into Google? How do we do a better job at competing in Google? I mean, both LinkedIn and Indeed do an amazing job dominating the Google results. And so how do companies go and do that for themselves? And I think we've been able to, find ways to do that. That's tough for a TA person. That's where, when you've got the recruitment marketing agency or internal team that can do that, I think that makes a big impact. And then I think beyond that, you've got to start looking at, social, and then just consumer media. How do I make sure I know my candidates, know where they're spending time, and if they're spending time on YouTube or if they're spending time on Spotify or, Popular Science, how do I go out and engage with them and start having, creating brand impressions and calls to action out there. Those three buckets are probably the three different areas that we focus on.
Oh, absolutely. And let's talk about AI, because it's kind of having sort of multiple impacts on everything from search to just everything. I mean, tell us about the impact AI is having and the opportunity that maybe it's also creating.
Yeah, I mean, I think on the front end, on the job seeker experience, I think that it's just like the Wild West, right? It's just like, there's agents, there's what happens on Google now from a summation and zero-click perspective, right? Where people are seeing the summation before without even having to click to a site anymore. And that's a risk for companies too that want to, get people over to their career site. And so I think from the candidate agent perspective, I think that's very unsettled. There's not like a leader right now that, organizations need to be super worried about. I'd say aside from like ChatGPT and Claude, where, just like you make your jobs optimized for Google and other search engines, there are ways to optimize your jobs for ChatGPT and for Claude. And that's something we've started to see change. So I think that's really the base thing that you could do to get ready.
No, absolutely. I think that's really interesting because, I think more and more people are sort of using ChatGPT as a search engine and a single source of truth about recommendations as well. So
it's funny how rapidly the default to like, hey, I'm just going to believe everything it throws at me, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of utility in it. And I think if I was, again, if this was obviously a very different version of Monster back in the day, this happened where Indeed came in and changed how search operated, and it really negatively impacted Monster, obviously, with the most recent, couple months. And I think that there's risk for, Indeed and LinkedIn with how search behavior is changing. And I think that that's a way that, organizations can get ahead if they start thinking about, well, how do I get to those? How do I populate my jobs? How do I get a presence on ChatGPT and Claude and other AI search, or AI tools? Then it'll help, give me an advantage in having that direct dialogue with the job seeker.
No, absolutely. And obviously in many markets, it's kind of sort of fairly tough economic times at the moment, or certainly uncertain, which is often just as bad when it comes to advertising and marketing. Obviously, a lot of employers are under pressure with budgets, but also, things taking longer to sign off. The things that sort of happen where we're in this, this kind of economic phase, as it were. What would your advice be to employers in terms of, keeping that momentum going so they can stand out and get the talent they need when they might have reduced budgets or it just takes longer to make decisions?
I think in this market, like you said, it's really It's really dicey, and people need to be cautious, and rightfully so. But I think that it's very hard to do so if you don't have visibility into the metrics of what's actually happening today, right? When you have to go and ask a CFO for, an incremental amount of money or a budget, or just to justify the budget that you had last year, or you've got to have the basic numbers behind what's happening. And I think that I'm still really surprised when we run into prospects that they don't have clear visibility into what they're getting for the dollars they spend in recruitment marketing and employer branding. And they're just there's an opportunity to do that. With most advertising campaigns tied to the ATS data, you can usually get. I mean, for most 99% of our clients, we can tell the story of, like, if you spend $1, here's what happens. And I think that in this type of environment, that's even more important. And I think that when you talk about a budget being reduced, like, that's our job as an agency, is to go find the ways to optimize, budget. Like, we're not just trying to take the dollars and spend them and, give ourselves a pat on the back after we spend it. And this, you've been in this side of the industry, and it's just, I think what we're trying to do is we're trying to optimize campaigns. And hey, if we got a cost per hire for, $1,000 last year, how do we get it for $750 this year? Because, the money doesn't, when we look at that optimization, maybe it's related to budget cuts and we're able to save the company money and we're under a lot of pressure to do that. But if we do that and we bring that cost per down and our budget doesn't go down, that frees up money to go try new things, to go try that employer branding on YouTube or Spotify. So I think there always needs to be an eye on, how do we optimize? How do we get better every year, every month, every week?
I completely agree with you. And I think the tracking thing is interesting as well, because, we were talking about this before we were recording. And, as you say, my background is in recruitment marketing. And, I was amazed a long time ago that people weren't tracking everything that they possibly could. So it's kind of a shame that that's still the case, because it's just so essential in terms of knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, every other part of the business is not going to be given that kind of grace, right? Sales, marketing, even IT. It's just, you've got to. These are table stakes for executive conversations, and I think that you've got to be ready for that. And it's just hard to go justify a new system, a new advertising campaign, anything, if you don't have the numbers behind, what happened last time, or at the very least, what do we expect, right? I mean, people want to. I think if you're a CFO, you want to see, like, well, what do I expect? Like, give me an estimate, and and if it doesn't work out, that's fine. That's part of marketing. You've just got to know, like, what do we learn? What do we avoid next time, or what do we get better at?
Is your TA function fit for the future? Over the last 10 years, I've done podcast interviews with hundreds of the world's most successful TA leaders and discovered exactly what they all have in common: 4 critical capabilities that drive their strategic impact: foresight, influence, talent, and technology. I've created a free assessment specifically designed for busy TA leaders like you to benchmark your capabilities against these 4 essential areas. You'll receive clear insights into your current strengths and opportunities, with practical guidance on enhancing your strategic impact. The assessment is completely free, takes 5 minutes to complete, and you get your results instantly. Benchmark your talent acquisition capability right now and start proactively shaping your future. Visit mattalder.me/podcast. That's mattalder.me/podcast. You mentioned employer branding then. I mean, how is employer branding changing? I hesitate to always say the words 2026, but we're over halfway through the year, so I'm going to say it probably the first time this year. How do people think about employer branding kind of going into the last part of this year and into next year?
Yeah, I mean, I think employer branding is really important, and I think obviously the larger the organizations, the better brand awareness they have, and but it's still not easy for them to go out there and do that. And I think employer branding is important for every size organization. And I think if you take a real baseline on what people expect, I think they really just need to get a sense of authentic stories from inside the organization. Most people, when they're looking for a job, they're exploring an employer and should I work there? They're trying to find something to relate to. And I think that if there's one thing that everybody should be considering in 2026 is like, how do we tell our authentic story, right? I mean, I think that's, and there are ways that the cool part is that there's clearly very grand and expensive ways to do that with, big video shoots and, lots of creative and lots of spend on consumer media sites and beyond. And I think that that's one way to go about it. But I mean, we've just had some really nice luck with, creating a very visible and strong social media presence for some brands. I mean, we do that for JCPenney and Pfizer. And I think that there's really just little nuggets that don't have to be outrageously expensive in order to tell your story. And I think that's the number one thing. Once you start telling your stories, once you get that creative, once you can then take that and deploy it wherever you'd like. Sometimes that's social, sometimes that's on your career site, sometimes that's out on, consumer media channels. So I think it's really about getting your story right, and then being able to package up the different nuggets of content and deploy it, to whatever degree your budget allows for. And it doesn't have to be a ton.
And I think the big thing there about authentic stories, I don't think it's ever been more important, because we're now living in a world just swamped with AI generated content, and sort of standing out from that. I'm sure people are looking for humanity and authenticity and all of those things, aren't they?
Yeah, and we just had a client that we redid a career site for, and the one thing they wanted, there was like, we don't want any stock photo. Like, we just want our people. And I think that that's a small thing, but a really important thing. And you know what a pain in the butt that is, from getting releases, and maybe if someone leaves, then you have to rotate them off the site and things like that. But I think they just want to make sure that it doesn't even sniff like it's a stock or an AI generated image. And I think that that's an important little thing that I think that we're all cognizant of when they relaunch their website.
And let's talk about career sites. I mean, where are we with career sites, now? What role are they playing? How are they developing? How should people think about them?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the most important asset in your TA portfolio, right? It's the gateway to getting to know our organization, helping guide them through the process of understanding who we are, what we offer. So I think it's huge. I mean, we do offer career sites. We chatted about that. I mean, we got into it about 3 years ago. After, Matt, I was adamant about just being technology agnostic and not doing career sites. But to be frank, the technology just wasn't doing what we needed it to do. I mean, at our heart as a marketing agency, we're trying to create conversions, right? When we do that advertising, we drive people back to a career site. We want that to convert into quality applicants and eventually hires. And I think that we felt like we had to get into the business because we weren't getting the candidate experience we wanted. We weren't getting the tracking that we needed for the visibility, and we weren't getting the integration into the ATS. And I think now all of those factors, whether it's our career site or someone else's career site, you've got to be able to have all of that. Like I said, going back to the numbers, you've got to have something that's going to allow you to track. You just can't have I mean, for many years, career sites were like, well, the career site gets the credit, that's not acceptable. There are many rivers that flow through the career site, and I think that's that's kind of a bit of a misnomer if you just say, well, the career site did all that work. I think that you have to know where the sources are. How the career site converts is really, really important. And I think that the little things that we're doing on a career site now that we're thinking of, what happens when the job rec disappears, right? It's just like a little tiny thing, Matt, but like, when there's some timing element between when it comes off the ATS and it comes off the career site. And, we created this thing called second chance pages. And so if the job's no longer there, because let's face it, recruiters share it on LinkedIn, it's indexed by Google, it takes a little time for Google to update. When they hit that landing page, they're presented another, relevant job versus just hitting a 404 error page. And just like little things like that are like, I actually care about, what you see when you come to my website. And I think every TA leader, every recruiter should have that sentiment of like, look, this is our front door, right? We're going to make it look good and we're going to give you a great experience. So I think it's really, I did this presentation, God, it was at a healthcare HR conference. And I asked people in the crowd, like, raise your hand if you're proud of your career site. And literally 80-90% of people didn't raise their hand. And I think that's a significant deficit at this day and age, that we still have people that aren't proud of the front door.
Yeah, and I think you make an excellent point there. We're talking about marketing and advertising, the destination site, the thing that converts the interest into the apply is a critical part of it. And you can't just sort of divorce it from the campaign. And so, having control over that and also being able to change it and optimize it is just such a big thing. And I think there's always a long way to go, but I've been encouraged by some of the things I've seen in kind of recent years with employers really getting that and, kind of working it.
Well, and even there's, I don't know if Matt, I saw an article from Chris Hoyt, who was over at Career Crossroads, about, Indeed's policy change to basically just send people directly to the ATS, and I mean, like, look at, people may not feel like this is a big deal, but it really is. It's somebody dictating what your candidate experience is going to be. And I think that Chris brought up so many good points about, the candidate experience, the compliance related issues. Like this is a big deal. And it's a very bold thing for Indeed to assume that they can dictate that. And I think that's going to be a really interesting challenge over the next few months and probably over into 2026.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think it's ultimately it's dictating to their customers in a really strange way. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out, and also really keen that people educate themselves and find out more about what's going on. Flipping over to technologies a little bit here. So as technology is developing, I think one of the interesting things about recruitment marketing for me has always been the potential of adding kind of more personalization. And we kind of see a little bit, it's sometimes on career sites and some of the things you were talking about there. Do you think that we're going to see more kind of dynamic personalization in recruitment marketing?
I think so. I mean, I think, as consumers go out and do, they have their shopping experiences, they're seeing all kinds of personalization, across the board. And I think that it's happening. I know that we do that where we can use first party data from, if a client's got, 100,000 or 1 million, people in their ATS, we can take that data, we can clearly keep it safe and anonymized and go out and target those candidates. And we can target those candidates based on, the job title they applied for, the geography they're in. So I think that personalization comes in very different forms. And even by spinning out landing pages for certain job categories, for certain nursing categories in certain geographies, even that is a form of personalization. But I think that more likely than not, you're going to see a continuation in that complexity of how we personalize to candidates. I think it'll be something that's expected, and it'll be like, hey, do you know me or do you not know me, as the candidate, looks at an ad or looks at a landing page.
No, 100%. I suppose a slightly broader question, really about the future as a kind of a final question. What do you think the future looks like? Where do you sort of think would like recruitment marketing and employer branding to be in a few years' time?
Yeah, I mean, this is it's so funny. Like, this is a harder question for me. Like, I always I think I mentioned to you, my roots are in like accounting originally before I got into marketing, and like, I'm very like practical and like, what can we do this year? And but that being said, like, obviously, like leading an organization and having our clients ask us is something that's really, really important. I think the fluidity of conversations between companies and employees will need to get. And what I mean by that is that, if you take a step back on the overall market of, hey, we're doing recruitment ads and people are trying to apply for jobs, there's a lot of intermediaries, right? There's, permanent staffing firms, temporary staffing firms. And I think that the future will break down the barriers between companies and employers. I think there'll be an easier flow of dialogue, an easier way for candidates to say, these are the things I really want that are personalized for me. And I hope that there's ways I think the innovation is around ways that employers can say, like, well, listen, like, we can give you that match. So it's some rapid advancement of personalization and, but between the companies and the employers. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there because nobody wants to make a misstep. right? And I think an employee doesn't want to take a bad job. A company doesn't want to hire a bad employee. Again, meaning not a bad employee like a bad person, but just a bad fit. So I think that the more that we can do to advance the connections between the employees and the employers, I think the better matches will happen, the better ROI that we'll get on the technology and the advertising that we invest in. And I think that makes, again, the TA team and HR team more efficient. And that gives them more resources to go out and, again, promote the organization, promote the employer brand.
Neil, thank you very much for talking to me.
Yeah, Matt, I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to doing it again someday.
My thanks to Neil. Don't forget, if you haven't already, you can benchmark your talent acquisition capability quickly and easily by completing the free Fit for the Future assessment. Just head over to mattalder.me/podcast. It only takes a few minutes and you'll receive valuable insights straight away. You can follow this podcast on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can search through all the past episodes at recruitingfuture.com, where you can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Recruiting Future Feast, and get the inside track on everything that's coming up on the show. Thanks very much for listening. I'll be back next time, and I hope you'll join me.
This is my show.